Welcome to the Afghan Eye YouTube channel. If this is your first visit, make sure to subscribe and press the notification bell so that you won't miss any of our new videos. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to another episode of the Afghan Eye Podcast. I'm your host Sangar Paykhar. Recently, a high-level Russian delegation led by the Secretary of the Security Council of Russian Federation, Sergei Shoigu, visited Kabul to engage with the government leaders of Afghanistan. This visit signals potential shifts in bilateral ties between Russia and Afghanistan amidst broader geopolitical changes. Joining me today is Mir-Ali Askerov, a political scientist from the Higher School of Economics in Saint Petersburg, Russia. Mir-Ali specializes in international relations and political processes in Asia and Africa. Mir-Ali has traveled extensively in Asia and Africa and most recently in Afghanistan. Mir-Ali, assalamu alaikum, welcome, and I'm so glad to have you on our show.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Thank you very much. Actually, I'm also very excited to be on your show because I am a long time follower of Afghan Eye. So in this sense, I'm very happy to be now someone who is not just listening but also talks.
Maybe you can give us a little bit of a background of who is Sergei Shoigu, what is his current role, and then we can discuss what it means that he has been sent on behalf of Russian Federation to meet the government leaders in Kabul.
I think it's quite clear that Sergei Shoigu is not a regular, so to say, member of the government. So this is a very important figure. So first of all, this is a person who was for a very long time a head of military, who was a minister of defense, and who was a minister of defense when Russia has launched special military operation. So I think this is already kind of underlines his importance and his role in political processes in Russia. Moreover, he has faced with the challenges when these events with Yevgeny Prigozhin and his march and let's call it coup attempt, even though I think coup here is kind of not the best term, but that's how they usually call it in English. So yeah, and he has, Yevgeny Prigozhin's narrative was directly against Sergei Shoigu, and even after that, he was not dismissed or something, So his position was changed, but only after the re-election and only after the change of the government. Itself. So. And now he is, as you mentioned, he is a secretary to the Security Council of Russian Federation, which is also a very important governmental body. It is responsible for all the issues connected to the security. So, yeah, I think this is already sounds important enough.
Before we discuss what this means, I also think that there is another dimension, the historical context of Russia's involvement in Afghanistan. Soviet-Afghan war left a lasting legacy. How do you think this history influences Russia's current approach to Afghanistan, especially now that the Taliban are in power?
Well, I must say that, Russia had a lot of wars in its history. Especially if we take both like Soviet legacy and pre-Soviet legacy, legacy of Russian Empire. However, honestly speaking, one war that kind of outstands in the narrative that is out there in Russia, in modern day Russia, regarding its wars, then this is a Soviet-Afghan war. So usually, first of all, many of those who participated in this war on the side of Soviet Union, they are still alive. So they are out there speaking, talking, and so on and so forth. And honestly speaking, the main narrative that is out there, also supported by these people as well, is that it was a mistake. So usually these people are a little bit lost, so to say. I mean, because on the one hand, I mean, it's even you can see it in in many Russian cinema, films, in pop culture. How they usually portray a veteran of Afghan Soviet war, and moreover, they think that this is a mistake not just because Soviet Union wasn't able to win this war. The narrative you usually hear from, for example, American veterans in Vietnam. Usually they're just sad about this war not being successful. But in this case, people usually see it as, we shouldn't even start it. So this war has started just due to mistakes of some Politburo members, just due to mistakes of some uh, advisors to Leonid Brezhnev, and so on and so forth. And secondly, I have communicated a lot with the veterans of Soviet-Afghan war, and I must say that I have never ever met anyone who wouldn't be very respectful towards Afghanistan, Afghan warriors, who would not say like, they were our enemies, but I have a very high respect towards them, and so on and so forth. And what also usually surprises me at like absolutely majority of these people there, they, for example, when I came from my visit to Afghanistan and I met with some of these people, they were like extremely happy to hear stories about Afghanistan, to hear that country is now, doing well. So I mean, they feel like it's not how usually, again, how I would usually expect them to react to the country where they served, and where they, had some traumatic experience, so to say. So usually they're still very positive about Afghanistan, and they even, I mean, I think also people who are in Afghanistan and who work, for example, in Afghan embassy here in Russia, who issue visas, maybe they also can confirm it. But it seems to me that many of these people actually are also now, they go to Afghanistan as a tourist. They like to visit the places where they've been, and so on and so forth. So yeah, in this sense, so just summarizing, I think that Soviet-Afghan war now, on the one hand, it is a kind of traumatic experience because everyone perceives this war as a mistake. And again, as a mistake, not just because of, because it was not victorious, but because it wasn't even a good decision, not right. It was not a correct decision to even start this war, you know. And on the other hand, this war, I think, and this experience has cultivated a sort of respect towards Afghans as a nation, towards Afghans as warriors, and so on and so forth. Actually, Russia has significantly changed from Soviet era, not even once. The most current change in Russia policy was like, let's say, in 2022, February 2022. So, and of course, it has changed. And here maybe I mean, to underline the most recent change, I would quote ex-prime minister and ex-president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, who said somewhere in spring or beginning of summer 2024, so this year, he said like, in the beginning of 2000s, we have perceived Americans as our partners and Taliban as terrorists. And now a lot has changed, he said. So, I mean, I think this kind of underlines like the most recent changes in Russia's perception and Russia's policy. But yeah, I mean, again, if you compare to Soviet times, but then of course it has changed a lot. I mean, first of all, there is no, I mean, it's not only regarding Afghanistan, but generally regarding the international policy, there is no any ideological framework in which these relationships are being shaped. Yeah, and second of all, now Russia tries to, recover from many years of, let's say, pro-Western orientation in its foreign policy. And of course, I mean, in this sense, Russia is more orientated towards the regional cooperations in the form of so-called South-South, and so on and so forth. So, in this sense, I mean, briefly, I think these are the main trends. And regarding Afghanistan, I think this quote by Dmitry Medvedev is also quite significant.
How about the geopolitical interests of Russia? Like former Soviet Union is still perceived as like current Russia is, especially here in the West, it is seen as more or less continuation of former Soviet Union, and the geopolitical interests of former Soviet Union and current Russia are often seen as similar. But if you look at this situation towards Afghanistan, would you say that the geopolitical interests of Russia has also changed?
Yeah, so first of all, honestly speaking, I wouldn't agree that like former Soviet Union and modern day Russia are same things, in many ways, not just in international politics, in general, and in some aspects, this is, I would say this in positive connotation, but in some aspects, even in negative connotation, that, we in Russia do understand that Soviet Union and Russia are two absolutely different things, So this is first thing that I would say. And secondly, whether the interest has changed, then yes, they did. So of course, when we're coming to Soviet era, then of course the Russia's interests in Afghanistan were completely different. I mean, the interest was to establish leftist-oriented government, to add one more country to the socialist bloc, and so on and so forth. I mean, you know it probably better than me. But now, of course, Russia has absolutely no interest even to be like, to play a significant role inside Afghanistan. No, I don't think this is the Russia's goal. First of all, because there are already some other countries who are, I mean, obviously much more successful than Russia. I mean, in this sense, I'm not sure that when we're talking external powers, for example, in Afghan economy, in Afghan politics, and so on and so forth, I don't think Russia even would have a chance to be number one country in Afghanistan who is out there. So this is and I think that Russia's policymakers understand this as well. On the other hand, there is a new dimension that is now very important to Russia is the security question. So Russia now is very interested in Afghanistan being safe, in Afghanistan being prosperous, in Afghanistan being stable. I mean, due to numerous reasons, maybe we can discuss them later. So,
would you say that the current foreign policy of Russia is primarily informed by realist thinking? Would you
yeah,
agree?
yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I would agree. I mean, there is I mean, actually, this is also a question that is being widely discussed inside Russia. That look, we are now conducting a very active external politics. We do have certain, let's say, narratives of what we are trying to promote, so to say, but still we don't have any clear ideology. So, I mean, by some people it is perceived as a negative thing that we need to create one, in order to explain people what are we, fighting for, and I mean more concrete and exact. Some people, vice versa, saying that look, actually, I mean, ideological framework would make our international policy more complicated, more framed, and this is not good. And yeah, I mean, but still, I mean, for us as people who are living and working and studying inside Russia, it is quite clear that it is absolutely different from the Soviet era when there was an ideology, when the external policy was ideologically driven. And yeah, now the situation is completely different. So in this sense, that's why I'm saying that, honestly speaking, I see absolutely no chance to say that today's Russia is the continuation of the Soviet Union, or especially when it comes to international.
Now let's dive into the recent visit of Sergei Shoigu. Um, we understand that Shoigu, when he was in Kabul, he met Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar. He met other very senior leaders of the Taliban who are current cabinet ministers, and they discussed economic cooperation, security, removing Taliban from Russia's terrorist blacklist. How significant is this visit in the broader context of Russian foreign policy, particularly, as you mentioned earlier, its pivot toward Asia and non-Western alliances?
I mean, on the one hand, yeah, this visit is a new step forward. and it kind of the level of this visit is higher than if we look on the previous interactions between Russian government and Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan. However, on the other hand, we must understand that this is not a game changer or something, because this is a trend that is also was covered by your podcast when you were discussing international policy of Islamic Emirate, and you also wrote about it a lot. So, I mean, in this sense, we can see that this is a trend that has started right after Islamic Emirate was proclaimed in Afghanistan. So Russia was always not, Russia always has underlined that its main interest is safety and stability in Afghanistan. Russia was always, when it came to any international interactions around Afghanistan, Russia was always saying that, look, if we do not invite a current Afghan government to these talks, there is they won't have any significant effect on Afghanistan. We must invite Afghan government to any talks that are somehow dealing with Afghanistan. And yeah, and Russia was also establishing a lot of diplomatic ties. I mean, that Afghan embassy in Moscow was one of the first embassies that were given to the Islamic Emirate. Also special representative of President of Russia to Afghanistan, Zamir Kabulov. Also, I think every month he has some meetings, interactions with the government officials in Afghanistan. So yeah, I mean, in this sense, this visit is just a continuation of a long trend that has started right after Islamic Emirate was proclaimed. Then why this visit is a significant step forward? Uh, I do believe that because it was a Security Council which was involved into this visit. Why? Because previously, I mean, again, this is just my observation, so I might be wrong here, but my observation is that all previous initiatives on Afghanistan and on strengthening ties with Afghanistan, with new Afghan government, they were mainly driven by, let's say, non-army ministries. I mean, Ministry of International Affairs more into this policy, uh, and when it comes to Ministry of Defense or Ministry of Interior, they were much more. Let's say I wouldn't say they were against. No, they were not against, but they were much more cautious about. They were sometimes saying that yeah, we do understand this and that, but still, I mean, the people out there are in our blacklist, or also because some Central Asian states, or particularly one exact state, were also saying a lot about it that, this going to be a source of instability and so on and so forth. So for a long time, our army and Ministry of Interior, they were much less cooperative. But now this visit is being held by Security Council, which I think now demonstrates that there is surely a consensus. Okay, so now it is not even the Ministry of Defense and others, they are surely ready for cooperation, and I think that this is first reason why this visit is significant. And then second is what we already briefly discussed is Sergei Shoigu is like a very high level, top level bureaucrat, top level politician in Russia. So in this sense, I mean, his visit is, and also another maybe what we can add is that he's quite close to the president. I mean, he and Vladimir Putin, they know each other for a long time. They also were, for example, having some informal, visits to some regions of Russia. They spent time together when Vladimir Putin was on his holiday. So, I mean, in this sense, we know that there is also informal ties between him and the president. So, in this sense, I think that this visit also is important because Sergei Shoigu himself is an important figure for the president, even in informal way, not just in informal. So I think this what makes this visit significant. Yeah, and coming back to the talks about the blacklist and removing the organization of Taliban, which is now banned in Russia from the terrorist blacklist. I mean, again, this is being discussed for a very, very long time. And again, this was also, actually, the quotes that I previously used by Dmitry Medvedev, they were said in this context, and also Special Representative Zamir Kabulov also numerously said that we understand that it was a mistake that we did in 90s, in 2000s, when we added Taliban to this terrorist blacklist. And yeah, so this issue is being discussed for a long time. Of course, then there might be a question, okay, why is it, since it is discussed for a long time, why Taliban is still in there, in this list? So in here, I must say that this is a problem with the Ministry of Justice, who is responsible for this. And the problem is that, it's going to be first time when the organization is going to be removed from the list. So the problem is that they want to do it in a such way that it's not going to be used further on by some other organizations to claim that they must be excluded from this list as well. So for example, let's say they wrote the explanation why they have excluded Taliban from the list, but then let's say some Ukrainian neo-Nazi organization comes and says, look, we also want to be excluded because you have excluded Taliban and because you wrote this, and that as the reason. So they want to make themselves safe from such claims. So that's why this is a very long process, because again, as I said, it's going to be first time ever when someone is being excluded from this list. So that's why it's a very complicated process for the jurists. So I think this is the main reason why it takes so long. So because they must foresee all scenarios that might be developed after this exclusion.
That's a very interesting, perspective that I think a lot of people miss in the whole conversation regarding how current Russian Federation operates, because from an outside perspective, especially in the West here, people assume that it's simply an autocracy and whatever Putin says, it happens. But now we see that there is a very complex bureaucracy and a legal dimension to everything. So very interesting, and thank you for providing that context, because now we see why it takes so long to do something that they have already stated that they wanted to do, namely removing the Taliban from a blacklist. But Shoigu also emphasized the interest in extracting minerals and establishing the trans-Afghan railway. Maybe you can dive into that, like what is the benefit and what is the risk for both sides in such cooperation?
So in this sense, first of all, I must underline that I am being, I'm not 100% sure that these proposals that were said about operational minerals and railways, that we must take it as something that is going to be done in the nearest future. Like, as something that has been said in order to start it somewhere, like almost right here, right now. I do think that it also might be just said as something that must underline willingness of Russia to cooperate in the sphere of economy with Afghanistan. I do believe that state-state cooperation is more likely to be started. At least more likely to be like actively started and huge project to be started only after Russia will exclude Taliban from the terrorist blacklist. I think this is going to be starting point for more in-depth cooperation. However, when it comes to economic ties, I think that Russian, let's say, private sector of economy, so business and private companies, they are going to be more and more involved into economical process in Afghanistan and economic ties with Afghanistan. Also, actually, yesterday I've watched one of the, talk shows on Russian media, which also, I think in the West, people think that, Russian media are, just Vladimir Putin talks 24/7 citizens, So yeah, on one of the TV shows, there was a guy from Ministry of Transport, I guess, and he was a participant, and he said a phrase like, while our business people are, just doing nothing, there are already many European Union citizens, many even Americans who are going to Afghanistan and they start business cooperation. And, in the future, when our business people will be, when they will wake up, it's going to be too late. So he was making such claim. And I also heard it from some other government representatives of the government in informal talks that I had with them. All of them were quite positive about the idea that Russian business should already be more actively involved in business cooperation with Afghanistan. Because as a state cooperation now is a little bit complicated again due to some reasons connected to this terrorist blacklisting. But private sector has absolutely no limitations for their cooperation. I mean, I was involved when I've been to Afghanistan. I was involved in to some activities connected to the Russian business activity in Afghanistan, and I must say that there was absolutely no questions to me, let's say on the border patrol or anything. When I was coming back, I would expect, that people might even ask me, okay, you've been there for like 2-3 months in Afghanistan, what you were doing there? There were absolutely no questions. So, I mean, in this sense, we can see that Russia puts no limitations to its business to cooperate. And when it comes to state projects, I think we should wait for some time. But again, this is just my observation. That's just my opinion. So, I mean, maybe what Sergei Shoigu said is going to be, implemented somewhere very close, and maybe I just miscalculated something in my forecast, so to say. But yeah, for now, I would consider it more as a statement, just to underline that Russia has such willingness. I'm not sure that we should think about it as something to be happened very soon, but soon.
Another interesting thing that was said during the conversations in Kabul is that Sergei Shoigu has discussed potential observer membership for Afghanistan in the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. How do you assess this matter? Do you think that Russia could, play the role of an advocate and facilitate Afghanistan's observer membership, and to what end, and how likely is this in your opinion?
Again, I think it is likely. I'm just not sure about when it is going to be happening. And here I'm more of, I mean, I'm not being too positive in my expectations. So I honestly speak, I'm not expecting it to be happen very soon. I think we will wait for some years, maybe. Again, here it is also not only about Russia, but I think in many ways it depends on China's position. We know that China also has absolutely no, serious issues or problems in building ties with new Afghan guard. At the same time, what I believe that both Russia and China, they don't want to be the first countries to officially recognize Afghan guard. It seems like, they have a ball and they keep throwing it to each other, and they wait who is going to be the first, because actually both of them want to do it. But both of them understand if they will do it, then of course they're going to face some new, maybe sanctions or, some new restrictions or whatever from the Western powers. But in this sense, Russia has much less to lose. I think we already have quite a lot of sanctions. So it seems that we have nothing to. So in this sense, I wouldn't be surprised if Russia is going to be the first country to do it. I even would expect it I would expect them to do it on the very same day when they will exclude Taliban from the blacklist, and on the same day they can recognize the government. I mean, I think this can be the case. And I think after anyone recognizes, whether it be Russia or China, I think we will have a domino effect. Then it's going to be new countries to recognize Taliban as, I mean, if it's on their blacklist, like to recognize it as a non-terrorist organization, and if it's not, then just recognize it as the current Afghan government, officially recognize it as an Afghan government. So yeah, so when it comes to SCO, I think that again it is tightly connected to the question of recognition. I don't think it would be easy, especially I mean based on SCO, like some bureaucratic issues, to add Afghanistan there. I mean the Islamic Emirate of Afghanistan as a member, even just to watch, to overwatch without its official recognition. I think this would be too complicated. So I think they might be informally invited. I mean, we saw it in many ways how many organizations would invite to their talks new Afghan government, but without any clear formal status, but they were in there. And it also seems to me, I mean, maybe you will correct me if I'm wrong, that actually Afghan government is also quite okay with that. I mean, I don't think they do really, let's say, care about their the Euro status and what is the official recognition or non-recognition. For them, it's most important how it really works, and it really works in a way that we know that, for example, China and Russia, they do cooperate with new government, but yeah, they don't recognize it officially, but everyone knows with whom Russia works in Afghanistan. No, it's clear, or with whom China works in Afghanistan. Who China or Russia or I don't know, Uzbekistan or Kazakhstan, whom they perceive as the Afghan government. I think it is clear. So, I mean, for me, it seems that for Afghan side, it's quite okay. I mean, they don't care what does, I don't know, Turkmenistan, how does it portray or how does it consider its government in its official documents, but it's more important on how it really interacts with the new government. Same with these organizations. I do believe that Afghan government could be invited to different activities of this organization without without given any like significant or any official status. But then after the recognition will happen, we will see, some significant steps in this direction.
One of the reasons why Western countries are very hesitant and they don't want to even discuss recognizing the Taliban led government in Afghanistan is the issue of women's rights, women and girls' education. And we saw the statement of a BRICS summit in Kazan. We discussed this with Ahmad Walid Kakar in our recent episode. There, they emphasized women's education, women's rights, minority groups in the BRICS statement, in the declaration after the 16th summit. Would you say that those matters also weigh in the decision of Russian Federation whether they want to recognize the Afghan government or not? And one of the matters that is very important for Western countries is that, let's just say, the Netherlands or any other country decides to build its diplomatic relations with the Taliban, the people in these countries, they will object because they would say, what are you doing? Are you going to have diplomatic relations with a country that oppresses women? How do the Russians see this? And maybe you can explain how this issue is perceived by the government and more broader by the people in Russia.
So when it comes to the government, what we have already discussed before is that current approach of Russia in its international policy is more, as you said, more realist driven. No, it's not ideologically driven in many aspects. So same here. Of course, we understand that for even for Russian government, this women rights question and some other cultural or said some worldview, let's say, of some of the decision makers in Afghanistan and some laws that are out there. They don't. I mean, the Russian government doesn't perceive them as something positive or fine. I mean, due to some natural reasons. I mean, first of all, because we understand that some of the laws, not some, actually, most of the decisions that are made in Afghanistan, they are deprived from a certain worldview of a new government, and it's quite clear that Russian government doesn't share same deep core beliefs. So of course they would consider this as being problematic. On the other hand, it's not a question around which Russia would build its foreign policy and its policy towards Afghanistan. Actually, it's not even a question around what around which the policy is built by Western countries. I think. No, so this is just some additional thing that they usually use, in order to explain something or in order to, make some claims and so on and so forth. But I don't believe that this is a real question that matters. No? Even I would say that if that would be a question that really matters, the agreement the Doha agreement would look different. No, if this was like such an important question, then it would be at least somehow, explained and how to say it, fixed in Doha agreements. So if this is a real deep core political belief of the Western, states and so on and so forth. So of course, for many years, this is a policy. We can see it from Cold War era, when this question started to be used as just a continuation of many other instruments for some imperialist policy. Now I think I sound not like a Russian, but a Soviet. A few minutes ago I said, no, there is no Soviet Union and Russia, and then me talking about imperialism. Okay, so
Yes, yes, it's okay, it's
so
okay. But I
yeah,
think, of course, it makes sense that human rights and women's rights and everything else is often used as a way to pressure certain states. It's very apparent, especially considering the current situation in Gaza. We see what's happening and how Western countries support that. But at the same time, here, even in Western societies, even though the governments may pursue a particular policy, they can't just do anything, because if the people perceive something as highly undesirable, this may impact election results. Like, for example, many analysts would say that the Biden administration was very reluctant in their approach towards the Taliban after August 2021, because they fear that if they show a too friendly face towards Taliban, this may impact them during the midterm elections for the Congress and later the presidential elections. Because during those last 4 years, we saw how Donald Trump was repeatedly saying that Joe Biden failed and look what's going on in Afghanistan. But likewise, there are many activists, many organizations that they raise the issue of women's education and girls' education. And I would say, I have some understanding of Russian politics. I do listen to Russian news. I read Russian news. And I see that this matter still has some weight in the discourse. So would you say that maybe the Russian government is cautious, or maybe they just want to, treat this matter in a very delicate way?
when it comes to the people's position, then of course, first of all, I must say that Russians in many ways are still influenced, and they still mainly consume Western narratives, especially when it comes to Afghanistan. I mean, not exactly to Afghanistan, but let's say to the countries where, to the regions, I would even say, to the regions where Russia doesn't have enough specialists, analysts with the high level of qualification. So what it leads to is just a retranslation or translation of Western media news to Russian language. And that's why, in many ways, Russians still consume Western narratives when it comes to Afghanistan, for example. For example, this recently, I think somewhere in end of September or even maybe beginning of October, there was this new wave of Western media discussing the law on, about women are not allowed to talk, this and that. I think you also observed it in your Twitter account as well. So actually, a week after it was discussed in English-speaking Twitter, this news came to Russian-speaking media. So then it was already me, explaining to some of my friends who knew that I visited Afghanistan. They were coming to me and asking me about this law and this and that, because we read this. And I understand that what they read is just a translation of a news that were written in Western media a week ago. Now, a week after, they are being written in some of the Russian. So this is the first thing. So that's why, of course, many people, they do shape their perception of Afghanistan is in many ways shaped by Western narratives. So this is number one. Number two is, again, of course, many people, they, as you said, they might be even now not very positive about Russia's government strengthening ties with Afghanistan. Especially while this organization is being in a terrorist blacklist. So there are a lot of even, let's say jokes among Russians that, we are, that our government is meeting with the very same people whom it considers a terrorist. So this seems like quite strange. So this is the second stream of, let's say, a sort of disagreement, But at the same time, again, I wouldn't say Afghanistan plays such a significant role for us in a policy question, because for USA, it's clear. For Netherlands, I think maybe it is still more important because, Netherlands, USA, Western world, they somehow, I guess, co-share some of the, interests and some of the traumas even. So, I'm not sure whether an average, person from Netherlands considers, USA favor in Afghanistan as its own favor, but I still think he kind of corresponds a little bit, to what US, tried to achieve at least in Afghanistan. But with Russia, it's different. Russians, they don't. I think they're much more positive about Afghanistan, about USA losing war in Afghanistan rather than about other events going on in Afghanistan. So that's why it is not a very serious question. This is not a question that would really affect the electoral process. Especially now after the special military operation has started. Again, this is somewhere on not on the first role, somewhere on the background. And another issue is that I think that many people, even now, they do understand that Afghanistan is a complicated country. Again, I think it is also due to the experience that Soviets had in Afghanistan. At least they understood that Afghanistan is not black and white. No, Afghanistan is not a country that is easy to understand. That there are a lot of processes that, and so on and so forth. So that's why many people, they would not even know exactly what are the real developments in the country are, or what are the forces there, and so on and so on and so forth. But at least they will understand that it is a complicated matter. That we should not think in black and white categories. This is good and this is bad. So that's why also many people, they already would be very skeptic to any news they would hear from Afghanistan. They would read them and they would at the same time think that, okay, there is I'm not sure about what I've just read. And I think that many issues, they can be, fixed in this sense. So first of all, now we know that the number of people who visit Afghanistan from Russia grows. And I think this is the best way to somehow, make people understand Afghanistan better. Like recently, one of the very prominent Russian bloggers went to Afghanistan. He made a very, very long podcast where he was just discussing, his visit to Afghanistan. And his main narrative there was that, you guys should be very careful in what you read and what you consume, and you should be. I mean, he is not pro-Taliban supporter or anything. He's a designer from Russia, with purple hairs or blue hairs. So I mean, this type of guy. And what he was saying is not that he's pro-Taliban or something. He was just trying to explain that, look, it is a very the reality is not so simple, and you should not just consume BBC or CNN or some other media outlets and read everything that is written there, because when you're coming there after reading this news, you expect some, a country where there is no life and so on and so forth. But then you come to Kabul and you see that this is a regular city with regular people who are having regular normal life. And yeah, so and he said actually this is, and he travels a lot. I think he visited almost all countries in the world. So he said like it's almost every time my experience is every time same, that I read one thing and then I come there and I see completely different things. So, and I think more and more visits like that, they will also reshape the current perception of Afghanistan. And yeah, and also, I mean, again, it doesn't mean that all the questions are going to be raised, because as I said, I do believe that, I mean, even if you take Russian Muslim regions, even there, people might have questions to Afghan government regarding girls' education and so on and so forth. So, I mean, of course, there are some real disagreements that are not based just on fake news from Western media. There are some real disagreements, but I don't believe that these disagreements are significantly important for both regular people in Russia and for Russian government. So that's why I think of course, they will underline that we want inclusive government, we want this and that law to be changed. But yeah, I don't think they will. I mean, this will really affect Russian policy towards Afghanistan.
Last point that I think is very significant that was discussed in Kabul recently by the delegation led by Sergei Shoigu is the role of United States in Afghanistan, because from what I have gathered, Shoigu criticized the fact that the assets of Afghanistan has been frozen by United States, and the fact that it prevents reconstruction efforts in Afghanistan. Obviously, this is a criticism that voiced by a member of Security Council of United Nations and a very powerful regional actor. It does have its implications, but how would you assess it? Like, in your opinion, when Russia says we are against the fact that the assets of Afghanistan are frozen by United States, what should we make out of this?
Well, I mean, first of all, of course, Russia and Afghanistan in this sense are on the same page when it comes to frozen assets. We also have some issues with Russian assets. They are now even being given to Ukraine, so they were transferred to them. So yeah, I mean, actually, I think that, I mean, I might be wrong, or maybe I remember something wrongly, but I believe even Vladimir Putin once mentioned this issue in one of his talks. He mentioned Afghanistan as the example of how US, just breaks the law and takes others' money and this and that. I might be wrong, but I believe even he mentioned it once. So maybe in this sense, Sergei Shoigu is not the highest person in Russian government who mentioned this. But yeah, I mean, anyway, this question is also being discussed in Russian media, for example, for a very long time, since the very first day when this happened. And it is always being discussed in a way that these are the money of Afghan people, and they should be, given to Afghan people. And yeah, so this issue was always, I mean, was very clearly perceived as the act of aggression, so to say, by the US, and as injustice. And yeah, so does it change anything when, I mean, Russia says it? I'm not sure, because I don't believe Russia has any opportunities to change the situation. I mean, Russia has its own assets being frozen, and Russia has its own issues and it's unable to change it. Actually, what Russia says is that, look, everything we do in our foreign policy last years is that we want to change, the world order where one country can, freeze assets and do whatever it wants, and has absolutely no consequence. So, maybe the situation is going to be changed in the future if there are going to be some significant changes in how the international policy nowadays operates out there. But for now, I don't see any. I don't see how Russia can influence this, and I don't see how. Even this statement can influence the fact that Afghan assets are frozen. And yeah, when it comes to Russian position, then again, I would say that this is a statement as its whole visit. It's only represents the trend that was out there for all the last years. So same with the assets. This is the position of Russia that was there for quite a long time, since the day one actually. When these assets were frozen, Russia never perceived this as a positive thing. Russia never perceived this as a, let's say, lawful thing. It was always perceived as the, let's say, financial crime committed by the US. So, and in this sense, Sergei Shoigu hasn't said anything new.
Okay. Russia's pivot to Asia, as you mentioned in the beginning of the show, is partly a response to economic blockades from Western nations after what has occurred between Russia and Ukraine. Um, how does Afghanistan fit in this larger geopolitical strategy? I mean, especially with projects like Trans-Afghan Railway and maybe potential energy deals. Does Afghanistan fit into that pivot to Asia strategy? And maybe you can also delve into this improving ties between Russia and Afghanistan and its impact on Central Asian republics.
Yeah, of course. Even today, when Afghanistan is being mentioned, it is usually mentioned in the context of Central Asia. So because also on one of my first answers, I mentioned that security and stability of Afghanistan is the key priority for Russia. Why? Because it is widely perceived that stability and safety of Central Asian post-Soviet states is tightly connected to the stability and safety in Afghanistan. So, and I think this is like the main issue. So for Russia, when it comes to, when it comes to its relations with Afghanistan, human rights, girls' education, was there as well. Minority rights, inclusive government. These are all the questions that being raised, but they do not play such a significant role, such an important role as safety and stability. Like safety and stability, these are the issues where that can really influence the international policy of Russia and Russia's policy towards Afghanistan. So, and one of the reasons why Russia tightly cooperates with the new government, because Russia does believe that a new government is the government that can secure Afghanistan, can bring stability to Afghanistan, and is the only actor out there in Afghanistan who could really solve security and safety issues, which is, in my opinion, kind of corresponds with the reality. So yeah, coming back to your question, in this sense, economic cooperation as well. I think it is formed in a way that, look, we want Afghanistan to be safe, we want Afghanistan to be stable, which means that we want Afghanistan also to be economically prosperous, which means that we need to, invite Afghanistan to the regional projects. And I would say that, again, here, almost all Central Asian post-Soviet Central Asian states, they are here on the same page with Russia, with one exception of one particular state, which is Tajikistan. But yeah, all other states are already, first of all, they already do cooperate quite strongly with Afghanistan, and they are very positive about any Russian initiatives to include Afghanistan into the, like let's say, intra-Asian cooperation, not just Central Asian, but Asian, and of course Central Asian as well. So in this sense, it seems to me that everyone, I mean, almost everyone in the post-Soviet region, I mean, Central Asian post-Soviet region, Russia, they are very positive about idea Afghanistan being economically prosperous, which means that, and moreover, for example, for Central Asian states, it's a mutually beneficial cooperation. I mean, it's not like sending aids to Afghanistan or, sending humanitarian, aid to Afghanistan.
This
So
is
it's
this is a very interesting point that you raised, because I think the stark contrast between the relationship of Afghanistan with Western countries and its Central Asian neighbors and Russia and China is that it's not informed by this dependency of Afghanistan on aid, but rather it's economic development, economic cooperation, integration into larger economic, organizations, which is very interesting because you would say the liberal democratic West, especially the way history is being taught here, is that Western countries became prosperous because of their economic relationship with the rest of the world. But here we see very non-liberal or non-democratic countries like Afghanistan engaging with Central Asian republics, with Russia and with China based on those interests. Would you say that the future of Russian-Afghan relations will be based on, practical necessity of having some security, or will it evolve into a strategic partnership?
yeah, I think these are not two, how to say it. These two paradigms, they don't contradict each other. So I do think that even now, I would say that current Afghan government is very close to be named strategic partner of Russia in the region. And I mean, if nothing serious is going to be happened, I mean, something that would completely change, the trend and paradigm and, whatever, I don't know what that can be, then I don't see any obstacles for Afghanistan, as I said, being more and more involved in not just cooperation with Russia, but also in regional cooperation, in cooperation with the regional organizations, and so on and so forth. So in this sense, I don't see any significant obstacles for further development of Russian-Afghan relations in all spheres: economy, safety, security, I don't know what else, e-governance or whatever. So I think that there is, a huge potential for this development. The only thing is what I said. I'm not saying that this is going to be happen tomorrow or after tomorrow or in 1 month. I do believe that time should pass, because of course there is also lack of trust. I mean, let us be clear. I do think that some of the Afghan officials have lack of trust to Russians. Russians do have lack of trust to Afghans, not in a way that they suspect them of being, enemies or whatever. But of course, since for many years there was no clear and strong cooperation with this of these people with each other, they need some time to understand each other more. So in this sense, of course, I don't think it's going to be a very quick process. But surely now we can see that for last years, the trend has not changed, and we can see that cooperation only becomes stronger from year to year. So in this sense, I don't see any reasons why it should be different.
All right. Thank you very much, Mir-Ali. It's great to have you on our show. I hope that we can have these conversations again and talk different aspects of, Russian-Afghan relations and maybe other regional developments. Do you have any plans to visit Afghanistan again?
Yeah, actually, I think it's going. I hope it's going to be happen very soon. Not sure about this year, like calendar year, because December is quite tough months. I mean, my main work. But yeah, somewhere close for sure.
Okay.
somewhere close to finish.
Well, maybe next time when you're visiting Afghanistan, maybe I will be there as well, and then maybe we can do a podcast in Afghanistan.
Yep, it
Anyways,
would be
Mir-Ali,
nice.
yeah, that would be
Maybe you
nice.
will not, you won't be needed this background that you have right now behind you. So maybe this is going to be a spot, nice spot for the
Exactly.
podcast, you know.
Exactly. Yes. So thank you very much again for your expertise and for your knowledge of Russian politics and its current policy towards Afghanistan. We hope to have you on our show again. For those who are listening and viewing this episode, if you like our work, if you appreciate what the Afghan Eye does, and if you would like to support us, please visit the Afghan Eye Patreon page to become a patron. And if you would like to make a one off donation, you can visit our PayPal page. The links will be in the descriptions of this episode. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you are listening to our podcast, make sure that you leave a review. That would help us a lot. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Thank you for inviting me. It's a great honor for me.